poor widow, gave her last $100 to a crying poor boy. 15 years later, the boy bought her a house. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. It was a burning hot afternoon in Millbrook, Georgia. 10-year-old Elijah Cole stood frozen on the sidewalk, shaking, his eyes red and full of tears. He had just lost something that could ruin everything. A $100 bill, his school registration money. It was the last his struggling father had scraped together. And Elijah knew exactly what would happen when he got home. "My stepmom said not to come back without the receipt," he whispered, trembling. "She's gonna throw us out." He searched every pocket. He ran back down every street. Nothing. The money was gone. People passed. No one stopped. Until one woman did. "Sweetheart," said a soft voice. "Why are you crying like that?" Elijah turned. It was an elderly fruit vendor standing beside a rickety table of peaches and jelly jars. Her name was Ruth Dawson, a widow known to many but close to no one. Her clothes were worn, her eyes kind. "I lost my school money," Elijah sniffed. "It was all we had. My stepmom, she's gonna hurt my dad again." "She said I'd ruin everything." Ruth paused. Then she walked to a battered tin box behind her fruit stand. Inside, $104, her entire week's earnings. She pulled out 5 $20 bills. "This is all I've got," she said, pressing it into his hands. "But I'd rather you go to school than me eat tonight." Elijah gasped. "Are you serious?" "I'm dead serious," she said. "Just promise me one thing. Stay in school, and one day help someone else." Elijah couldn't speak. He could only nod through tears. "Thank you, ma'am. I swear I'll never forget you. Remember the name Ruth Dawson?" She smiled. He turned and ran toward the school. Ruth sat back down under the sweltering sun. No food, no customers, no money. But peace in her heart. And as Elijah disappeared around the corner, he whispered, "God, please bless that woman. I'll find her again." One day, 3 hours had passed. Elijah returned home with the school receipt in his hand. The sun was setting, casting a pale orange light through the cracked blinds of their tiny apartment. His father, Franklin Cole, sat hunched on the wooden bench outside, worry written all over his face. As Elijah approached, Franklin stood up immediately. "You got it?" he asked quickly. Elijah pulled out the receipt. His father sighed in relief. "Good," Franklin whispered. "That's one less battle to fight today." But Elijah didn't smile. "Dad," he said quietly, "I have to tell you something." Franklin's face tensed. "What is it?" "I lost the money," Elijah said. "It fell out on my way to school. I tried everything. I retraced my steps. I cried in the street. I didn't know what to do." Franklin closed his eyes. "Then how did you pay?" Elijah looked down at the ground. "A woman helped me, a fruit vendor. She saw me crying and gave me $100. Said it was all she had." Franklin stepped back, stunned. "She what?" "She didn't even know my name. She just gave it to me. Like she'd done it 1,000 times before." Franklin sat back down, silent. After a long pause, he said, "We need to find her. A person like that. That's not common." "I promised her," Elijah said. "I told her I'd never forget her. I told her I'd come back one day." His father nodded slowly. "We'll go tomorrow." First thing. But just across town, a very different day was coming to an end. Ruth Dawson was walking home with her 17-year-old daughter, Naomi. The bags in their hands were empty. Not a single fruit had sold. The sidewalk was crowded, but their spirits were not. Ruth hadn't eaten all day. Naomi had split her last granola bar with her during lunch. They turned onto Maple Lane, the narrow street where they rented a one-bedroom unit behind a crumbling house. But something felt wrong. Ruth could feel it before she saw it, and then she saw it. Their things were on the sidewalk. Naomi dropped the bags. A suitcase, a broken fan, 2 baskets, a pile of clothes. Everything was sitting outside their door. The front gate was chained shut. Standing near the porch was a tall, heavy man in a white tank top. Mr. Garrison, the landlord. "I told you, Ruth," he said, arms folded.
12 months behind on rent. I can't wait forever. Ruth stepped forward. "Please, Mr. Garrison, I just lost my stall today. The city shut us down."
"I'm begging, just a few more days." He shook his head. "I've got new tenants, paying tenants. I run a business, not a charity." Naomi ran to her mother and grabbed her hand. "It's okay, Mom. Let's just go." "But where?" Ruth whispered. Garrison slammed the gate shut and went back inside. The street was still. A few neighbors peeked from behind their curtains. No one came outside. Ruth and Naomi sat quietly on the curb, bags beside them, as the sky grew darker. "I'm sorry, baby," Ruth said, her voice cracking. "I really tried." Naomi leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "You're the best mom in the world." They sat in silence. The streetlight flickered. A distant dog barked. And then Ruth whispered, "God, I don't regret helping that boy. If I had to choose again, I'd still give him everything. But please, we need a miracle now." The next morning, they woke to the cold cement beneath them. Their bodies ached, and hunger gnawed at their stomachs. Ruth stood and brushed herself off. Naomi wrapped their clothes in an old bedsheet and tied it like a sack. They didn't speak much. But as they walked toward the bus stop, Ruth finally said, "We can't stay in this town. Not like this. We'll go to Selma. My friend Sandra lives there." "She might be able to help." Naomi nodded. "Let's try." With her last $12, Ruth bought 2 bus tickets to Selma, Alabama. The ride took almost 3 hours. The bus was old. The seats creaked, and the air conditioning barely worked. But Ruth stayed calm. She stared out the window and prayed. They arrived around noon. Selma looked different. Older buildings, quieter streets, but a certain warmth hung in the air. Ruth remembered Sandra's address by heart. They walked 3 blocks under the noon sun, finally stopping in front of a small white house with flower pots on the porch. Ruth knocked. A few moments later, the door creaked open. And there she was. Sandra Langston, her old friend from church, gasped. "Ruth?" Ruth tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "We lost everything, Sandra. My stall's gone. We were evicted. We slept on the sidewalk last night." Sandra didn't ask another question. She opened her arms. "Come inside, sis. Come in now." An hour later, they were bathed, fed, and sitting in clean clothes on the sofa. "I was just about to turn in the key to my landlord," Sandra said. "My husband and I are moving to Texas next week. This place is paid up till the end of the year." Ruth looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Sandra smiled, "you and Naomi can stay here. I'll transfer the lease to your name. Rent's covered for the next 8 months." Ruth burst into tears. "I don't know how to thank you." Sandra handed her a small envelope. "Use this to restart your fruit stall." "It's not much, just something I saved in case of emergencies." Naomi cried too. That night, they slept in real beds, under a roof, with hope in their hearts. Back in Millbrook, Elijah and Franklin went to the corner where the fruit stalls once stood, but it was gone. The city had bulldozed everything 2 days earlier. A giant metal fence now surrounded the space. A sign read, "Coming soon, Millbrook Civic Parking Lot." Elijah stared in disbelief. "This was it," he whispered. "Right here. This was where she sat." Franklin looked around. Let's ask someone. But no one around knew anything. New workers had taken over the area. She's gone, Elijah said. And I don't even know her address. Just her name. Write it down, Franklin said. One day we'll find her. Elijah wrote it on the back of his school notebook. Ruth Dawson, the woman who saved me. The years passed. Ruth reopened her fruit stall in Selma. Naomi returned to school and later attended a community college while helping her mother part-time. Life was never easy, but it was stable. They lived humbly, but with pride. Naomi graduated with a degree in culinary arts. She dreamed of becoming a chef, but no one hired her. So she stayed home, helping her mother slice peaches and box preserves. "Don't worry, Mama," she said one evening. "Our story isn't over yet." I can feel it. Meanwhile, Elijah grew. He graduated from high school with honors, then college with a degree in business management. His father's lottery winnings had helped start a small delivery business. Elijah turned that business into a logistics empire over the next decade. By 25, he had offices in 5 cities. By 28, he was on Forbes' Young Entrepreneurs to Watch. But once a year, on the same exact day, he would sit alone in his corner office, stare out the window and whisper, "Where are you, Ms. Ruth?" He searched for her. Social media, local newspapers. Phone books, no trace. The fruit stall had disappeared. The city records had no forwarding address. Still, he never gave up. "She gave me her last," he told himself. "One day, I'll give her my best." One Saturday morning, Ruth wasn't feeling well. Naomi offered to watch the stand while she rested. Ruth insisted she could still walk, but Naomi wouldn't allow it. "I'll be back before you know it," Naomi said, kissing her forehead. She set up the fruit table outside a hardware store in downtown Selma. Around noon, an older gentleman in a tailored jacket stopped by. He bought 2 bags of peaches. "You're a good salesperson," he smiled. "You speak well." "What's your name?" "Naomi," she replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "My name's Mr. Bennett. I'm a businessman. My cook just moved away." "I've been looking for someone to help at home." Naomi blinked. "Sir? Would you consider a job? You cook?" Naomi smiled faintly. "I do." And so it began. Naomi hesitated on the front porch of Mr. Bennett's home. The house sat on a quiet street in Montgomery, Alabama. It wasn't a mansion, but it had strong bones. White siding, blue shutters, a wraparound porch, and a wind chime that sang with every breeze. It looked like the kind of place where stories happened. Mr. Bennett met her at the door. "You must be Naomi," he said with a warm smile. Come in, come in." She stepped inside, taking in the cozy living room. Hardwood floors, pictures of family vacations, and a faint smell of coffee and cinnamon. It felt lived in, real. "I'll show you your room first," he said. "We keep things simple here. You'll have your own space, and you'll be paid weekly. Just cook, keep the kitchen clean, and feel free to use the rest of the house." "Think of it as home." Naomi nodded, still unsure. "Thank you, sir." "Please," he chuckled. "Just call me Mr. Bennett." Her first few days were quiet. Naomi cooked basic meals, grits and eggs in the morning, baked chicken and cornbread at night. Mr. Bennett always complimented her work with a kind word. "You've got hands like gold, young lady," he said one evening over meatloaf. "Best meal I've had since my wife passed." Naomi smiled politely. "Thank you," but her thoughts were always with her mother. Every night she called Ruth to check in. "Mama, how's the stall today?" "Same as always," Ruth replied. "Hot sun, slow sales." "But I'm breathing." "That's enough." Naomi missed her, but she knew this opportunity was rare. 2 weeks later, the quiet house stirred. A car pulled up one Sunday afternoon. Naomi was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters after baking sweet potato pie. She heard the door open, footsteps, a suitcase rolling across the wood floor. Then a deep male voice called out, "Dad?" Mr. Bennett appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up. "Matthew." "You're early." Naomi peeked out of the kitchen, and there he was. Tall. Broad shoulders, a strong jaw, and warm brown eyes. Dressed in jeans and a gray shirt, he looked nothing like the polished CEOs she'd seen on TV, but somehow more powerful. Their eyes met. "Oh, hello," she said, stepping back a little. He gave a small nod and smiled. "Hi there. You must be the new cook. I'm Matthew." Naomi nodded. "Nice to meet you. I'm Naomi." "You made this pie?" he asked, pointing to the counter. "Yes," she replied, feeling awkward. He took a fork, cut a slice, and took a bite. His eyes widened. "Okay. I see why Dad kept bragging about you. This is ridiculous." Naomi laughed softly. "Thank you." From that day on, things changed. Matthew seemed to appear in the kitchen more often than necessary. At first, it was innocent. "Naomi, is there any more of that chili left?" Or, "Naomi, teach me how to make that cornbread. I want to impress my coworkers." She humored him. He wasn't pushy. He didn't flirt too directly, but his presence was undeniable. He asked questions, helped carry groceries, offered to fix a broken cabinet door in the pantry. Once, when she came back from the market, he was waiting at the driveway with a large paper bag. "For you," he said. She opened it. Inside was a brand new apron with her name embroidered in gold script, Naomi's Kitchen. Her eyes watered. "This is beautiful. I figured you deserved one," he said. "You make this house feel alive again." Over the next month, Naomi found herself looking forward to his footsteps. She'd cook with extra care, wondering what he'd say when he tasted each meal. Sometimes, she caught herself checking her hair in the toaster reflection. Other times, she'd smile for no reason when she heard his voice in the hallway. But she said nothing. So did he, until one night. It was a Thursday evening. Naomi had just finished washing dishes. The rain tapped lightly against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. Matthew walked into the kitchen holding 2 mugs of tea. "I figured you could use one," he said. "Thanks," she said, taking it with a smile. They sat at the small table in the corner. The lights were low. The world felt far away. Matthew leaned back. "You know," he said, "I've met a lot of women in my life. Different cities, different worlds. But none of them ever made me feel peace. Until now." Naomi blinked, unsure what to say. He looked at her, his expression calm, but vulnerable. "I think I'm falling for you," he said softly. Naomi's breath caught. "I didn't mean to make things weird," he added quickly. "If you don't feel the same, I'll back off." She shook her head. "It's not that." "Then what is it?" Naomi looked down. "I'm just a girl from a fruit stall. My mom still sells on the sidewalk." "I'm nobody special." Matthew leaned forward. "That's where you're wrong. You're the most special person I've met." Silence. Then Naomi whispered, "I think I've been falling too." He smiled, reached for her hand, and gently held it. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But something changed. The next weekend, Mr. Bennett gave Naomi permission to visit her mother. "Go see your mama," he said with a wink. "Tell her she raised a star." Naomi packed some groceries and a gift, her first full paycheck. She had bought her mom a new church dress and a pair of soft slippers. When Ruth opened the door and saw her daughter, she broke into tears. "My baby," she said, hugging her tight. "You look like money." Naomi laughed. "It's the lighting, Mama." Inside, they sat at the old wooden table. Naomi served leftover pie she had brought from the house. Ruth looked at her daughter closely. "You're glowing," she said. "What's going on?" Naomi hesitated. Then she smiled shyly. "There's someone."
Ruth raised an eyebrow. Oh? Mr. Bennett's son. Matthew. He's kind, smart. He listens. He makes me feel seen. Ruth stayed quiet for a moment. Then she leaned forward. Do you trust him? Naomi nodded. Yes. I think he's serious. Then pray, Ruth said softly, and move slow. Not all glitter is gold. But when something shines without trying, that's the kind to keep. Naomi hugged her mother tightly. I've missed your words. Back in Montgomery, Matthew was pacing in the garden behind the house. His father sat on the porch, reading the newspaper. You all right, son? Mr. Bennett asked. I'm in love with her, Matthew blurted. Mr. Bennett lowered the paper. With Naomi? Matthew nodded. I don't know how it happened. She just got under my skin. Mr. Bennett smiled. I'm not surprised. That girl is special. I want to marry her, Matthew said. Soon. No games, Mr. Bennett nodded. Then you've got my blessing. But you'd better mean it. Matthew looked up. I do. When Naomi returned the next day, Matthew was waiting. He helped her with her bags, then led her to the back garden. The roses were blooming. The sky was golden. Naomi, he said, turning to her. There's something I have to say, she smiled. I'm listening. I know it's fast. Maybe it's crazy. But life's too short to wait. He took her hand. I love you. I want to marry you. Not someday, soon. If you'll have me. Naomi's heart beat faster. Her lips trembled. She stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. I love you too. And yes, I'll marry you. Matthew pulled her into a gentle hug. The wind rustled the trees. The chimes on the porch sang softly. Inside the house, Mr. Bennett peeked through the curtain, smiling. God has a funny way of writing stories, he murmured. That night, Matthew sat with Naomi. I want to meet your mother, he said. I want to thank the woman who raised you. Naomi nodded. She'll love you. Saturday morning, they took a bus to Selma. Matthew wore a simple gray polo. Naomi wore a sky blue dress. They held hands the whole way. When they reached Ruth's house, Naomi knocked on the door. Ruth opened it with a smile. You again? Naomi laughed. I brought someone. Matthew stepped forward. Good afternoon, ma'am. Ruth's eyes studied him. You didn't tell me your friend was so handsome. They all laughed, but Matthew's smile slowly faded. Ma'am, he said gently, your name, it wouldn't be Ruth Dawson, would it? Ruth paused. Yes, why? He stepped closer. 15 years ago. I was a boy crying on a sidewalk in Millbrook. I lost a $100 bill. My stepmother said not to come home without a school receipt. Ruth's eyes widened. I remember, she whispered. The boy. The one who... You gave me everything, Matthew said, voice shaking. Your last dollar. Your last hope. You saved me. Ruth gasped. Her knees buckled, and Naomi caught her. Oh my God, she whispered. You told me to remember your name, Matthew said. I did. I never forgot. Tears rolled down Ruth's cheeks. I used to pray for you, she whispered. I used to wonder what happened to you. Matthew knelt before her. I've been looking for you for years, and somehow I found you through your daughter, who I love. Naomi's hands flew to her mouth. Wait, you're the boy? Matthew nodded. Yes. Ruth covered her face, weeping. You came back. He held her hands. Now let me give back. Let me honor you. They embraced, 3 hearts beating together. 3 lives finally healed. The living room of Ruth Dawson's modest home was still. Only the soft ticking of a wall clock marked the passing of time. Naomi sat between Matthew and her mother, stunned by what had just unfolded.
The boy her mother helped 15 years ago, the boy who disappeared into the world, had not only returned, but was the man she had fallen in love with. Ruth still trembled as she held her daughter's hand in one and Matthew's in the other. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Matthew said gently. "You already said it all, 15 years ago. That day on the sidewalk. You didn't know me, you had nothing. But you gave me hope." Ruth looked at him, tears still shining in her eyes. "I prayed for you, for years, not because I wanted anything back. I just wanted you to be safe." "I was," he said. "Because of you." Naomi looked between them, still piecing it all together. "So when you said a woman helped you, that was my mom?" Matthew nodded slowly. "I never forgot her face, but I never expected to find her here, let alone that she'd be your mother." Ruth let out a soft laugh through her tears. "The Lord writes better stories than we ever could." They sat for another hour, sharing memories, filling in the missing years. Matthew explained how after Ruth helped him, his father had won a life-changing lottery. "That blessing came right after your kindness," he said to Ruth. "It felt like divine timing. We went from being nearly homeless to owning businesses." Ruth smiled. "I remember those nights. After I gave you that money, I had nothing left, but I told God I didn't regret it." "You were the seed," Matthew said, "and I've never stopped trying to honor it." That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Matthew stood and cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Ruth with respect, "I came here today not just to say thank you. I came to ask for your blessing." Naomi turned, wide-eyed. Matthew took Naomi's hand. "I want to marry your daughter. I want to take care of her, and you. I want to make sure she never has to sell fruit in the sun again." Ruth looked at them both for a long time. Then she smiled. "Son," she said, "you already have my blessing. But remember, love is more than sweet words. It's every day. It's sticking around when things get messy." Matthew nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Naomi leaned on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." 2 weeks later, a quiet ceremony was held at a small garden church in Montgomery. Just family, a few close friends, and warm spring air. Naomi wore a modest cream gown, soft curls falling to her shoulders. Matthew stood tall in a navy blue suit, pride and awe in his eyes. Mr. Bennett gave Naomi a gentle hug before the vows. "You made my house a home again," he whispered. "Now you're truly family." As the minister spoke the words, "Do you take?" a gentle breeze swept through the trees. Naomi looked into Matthew's eyes. "I do." And with that, the chapter that began with $100 and a roadside fruit stand bloomed into something no one had imagined. The couple settled into a new home just 10 minutes from Mr. Bennett's place. Not a mansion, but warm, bright, and filled with laughter. Naomi quickly became more than a cook. She helped manage Matthew's growing real estate business, adding her mother's wisdom to every decision. Ruth moved into a cozy 2-bedroom house down the road, purchased by Matthew as a gift. It had a flower garden, a porch swing, and a plaque on the door that read, "Ruth's Rest." Every Sunday, the family gathered for dinner. Naomi cooked, Matthew set the table, and Ruth told stories that made them all laugh. It was peace. But peace, as life often teaches, isn't always permanent. 6 months after the wedding, Naomi found herself waking up nauseous. At first, she blamed a bad meal. But then the signs became too clear. She stood in the bathroom staring at the pregnancy test. Positive. Her hands trembled as she walked back to the bedroom. Matthew was reading a report on his laptop when he looked up. "You okay?" Naomi held up the test, her eyes wide. His face broke into a grin. "Are you serious?" She nodded.
I guess we're having a baby." He jumped from the bed and pulled her into a hug. "No," he whispered, "we're having a miracle." When Ruth heard the news, she wept again. "God doubled what I lost." Months passed quickly. Naomi's belly grew. So did the love in their home. Then at the hospital on a cool Friday morning, twins were born. 2 healthy baby boys. Ruth held one in her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You gave me life twice," she said to Naomi. "Once when you were born, and again today." Matthew kissed Naomi's forehead. "Our sons will know your name, Ruth. They'll grow up knowing what sacrifice means, what kindness looks like," Naomi whispered. "We'll name one of them Elijah Jr." The news of Matthew's generosity started to spread, not through flashy headlines, but through people. Community members, workers, neighbors. He built a new wing at the school. He paid off the medical debt of 6 families. He hired women from the shelters as office assistants. But every time someone asked him why, he gave the same answer. "Because someone once gave me her last $100. And she never asked for anything in return." One afternoon, Matthew received a letter in the mail. It was from an old friend, a documentary producer in Atlanta. The letter read, "I heard your story through a cousin in Millbrook. I'd love to tell it. Not for fame, but to remind people what one act of kindness can do. Would you be willing to talk?" At first, Matthew hesitated. He wasn't interested in attention, but Ruth was the one who encouraged him. "If your story can help someone else take a chance on a stranger," she said, "then tell it." A month later, cameras rolled in their backyard. Ruth sat in her rocking chair. Naomi held one baby, Matthew held the other. The producer asked the final question. "What would you say to the version of yourself 15 years ago, the little boy crying on the sidewalk?" Matthew looked at the lens and took a breath. "I'd say, don't give up. Someone out there believes in you, even if you don't know it yet. And when you get the chance to return that kindness, don't hesitate." The crew was silent. Then Ruth leaned forward and said quietly, "His name was Elijah. But I didn't need to know that to help him. I just saw a child who needed love." The documentary aired on public television and was later uploaded to YouTube. It didn't go viral overnight, but over the weeks, views climbed. Comments poured in. "This reminded me of my grandmother. We need more Ruths in this world. I cried through the whole thing. Faith in humanity restored." One rainy evening, Matthew sat alone on the porch. The twins had just gone to sleep. Naomi was reading inside. He rocked gently in the porch swing, listening to the rain. Ruth joined him, wrapped in a shawl. "You all right?" she asked. "Just thinking," he said. "About?" He turned to her. "About you." "About that day. About how different life would have been if you hadn't looked up from your fruit stand." Ruth smiled. "Sometimes I wonder why I even did it." "You know why," he said. "You saw something in me I didn't even see in myself." She nodded. "Maybe. Or maybe I was just tired of seeing the world turn away from kids in pain." He reached over and took her hand. "Well, you changed everything." Before going to bed that night, Matthew walked into the twins' room. He stood over their cribs, watching them breathe. "Someday," he whispered, "you'll learn about a woman named Ruth. She wasn't famous. She didn't have much. But she gave more than anyone ever could." He looked around the room, at the photos, the rocking chair, the blanket Naomi had made. "You're here because someone believed in your dad, when no one else did." He turned out the light and walked to bed, the sound of the rain still falling. It had been nearly 2 years since Ruth Dawson gave her blessing on that little backyard porch in Montgomery. Life had bloomed in ways none of them expected. The twins, Elijah Jr. and Micah, had grown from newborns to waddling toddlers.
They stumbled through the living room with giggles, toy cars in one hand and bananas in the other. Naomi had turned the guest room into a playroom, filled with books, building blocks, and a small chalkboard that read, "Our story began with kindness." Ruth came over every day. She didn't need an invitation. She had a key. Each time she walked in, she would say the same thing. "Smells like purpose in here." Matthew always smiled when she said that. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect family. But perfection has a way of attracting pressure. The first hit came from the business side. Matthew's real estate company had expanded rapidly. Too rapidly. What began as a humble firm helping first-time homebuyers had now ballooned into a 10-branch organization covering 3 states. With expansion came partners, and with partners came tension. One morning, Naomi walked into Matthew's home office to find him staring blankly at a spreadsheet. "Everything all right?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Finally, he muttered, "They want to buy me out." Naomi froze. "What?" "The board. They think I'm moving too slow. I'm not aggressive enough. They want someone who thinks with numbers, not people." Naomi pulled up a chair beside him. "You built this with your heart," she said. "Don't let them erase the soul from it." Matthew looked up. "I gave away too much. Helped too many. They see it as weakness." "No," she said firmly. "It's strength. But you have to decide. Are you in this to make them rich or to keep your promise?" Matthew sat back in silence. That night, Ruth came by to drop off some homemade soup. She found Matthew alone on the porch, the bowl untouched beside him. "What's bothering you, son?" He explained everything. The threats, the power plays, the pressure to compromise. Ruth listened quietly. When he finished, she said something simple. "When God gives you a field, He expects you to harvest truth, not just profit." Matthew nodded slowly. "Then I think it's time I walk away. Start over, my way." Ruth touched his hand. "Then do it with peace." Within the next month, Matthew sold his shares, stepped down as CEO, and walked away from the company he had built from nothing. News spread fast. Blogs, social media, whispers at local business expos. Some called him foolish. Others called him principled. But the decision came with consequences. His income dropped. Friends vanished. Even former employees, people he had mentored, stopped answering his calls. One afternoon, Naomi found him in the garage, staring at an old toolbox. "I thought these people cared," he said. Naomi walked up and rested her head on his shoulder. "They cared about your light, but not your fire." To stay afloat, Matthew began working as a private consultant. No big team, just him and a desk in the attic. Naomi picked up part-time work at the library, where she hosted story time for kids. Her voice became a local treasure, calm, warm, and full of wisdom. The twins were enrolled in a preschool down the street, and through it all, Ruth never left. "Seasons change," she often said, "but roots remain." It was around that time something else happened. A letter came in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Matthew opened it at the kitchen table. Naomi sat nearby, feeding the boys. He unfolded the page. His eyes moved quickly. Then slower, then stopped. "What is it?" Naomi asked. He handed it to her. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Elijah Bennett, my name is Cynthia Parks. I'm writing on behalf of a man named Joseph Garrett. 15 years ago, he was your stepmother's brother. He's dying now, terminal cancer. He says he wronged you, that your school fees were stolen by him that day, not lost. He wants to see you before he goes. He says he remembers you crying on the sidewalk, and he says he watched you walk away while he counted your $100 in a back alley. He's at Mercy Hill Hospice. Room 206. I know you don't owe him anything, but he asked me to try.
Sincerely, Cynthia Naomi looked up, speechless. Matthew sat still for a long moment. Then he stood. I'm going. The hospice was quiet. White walls. Faint beeping. A nurse led him to room 206. Inside, an old man lay pale and weak. Tubes, machines, sunlight through half-closed blinds. The man opened one eye. "Matthew," he rasped. Matthew stepped forward. "Joseph?" Joseph nodded weakly. I was a drunk back then. Bitter. Broke. I stole from a boy who did nothing wrong." Matthew said nothing. Joseph continued. "Your stepmother didn't know. She blamed you. Beat your father. But it was me." Matthew folded his arms. "Why tell me now?" "Because I'm dying. And because guilt eats more than cancer ever will." Matthew stood there, emotions tangled in his chest. "I hated you for years," he said, "but I'm not here for hate." Joseph's eyes filled with tears. "Then why are you here?" "To free myself," Matthew said. "To forgive," Joseph sobbed. Matthew leaned in, placed a hand on his arm, and whispered, "May peace find you." Back in Montgomery, Ruth sat with Naomi in the kitchen. "He went?" she asked. Naomi nodded. "He forgave the man who broke him." Ruth looked up. "Then he's more of a man than even I realized." 2 months later, Naomi received a call from the Montgomery Herald. "Mrs. Bennett, would you be open to being the keynote speaker at our Women's Leadership Luncheon?" Naomi was stunned. "Me? Yes, we saw the documentary. We'd love to hear your voice." "Your journey." Naomi hesitated. "I'm not a leader." "You are," the caller said. "You just don't know it yet." The luncheon took place in a bright hall downtown. Naomi stood behind the podium, a simple cream blouse and soft curls around her face. She looked out at a crowd of 200 women, young and old. "I'm not here because I did something extraordinary," she began. "I'm here because someone did something for me, something simple but brave." She told them about Ruth, about the sidewalk, the $100, the loss, the gain. "But the real story isn't about money," Naomi said. "It's about choosing to give when you're empty and trusting that what you plant in pain will grow in grace." The room was silent. Then the applause came. Standing, loud, moved. Afterward, a young woman approached Naomi, tears in her eyes. "I grew up with nothing," she said. "Hearing your story, it gave me hope." "Thank you." Naomi hugged her tightly. "You matter. Never forget that." Later that night, Naomi and Matthew sat under the stars on the porch. "I'm proud of you," Matthew said. "I just spoke from the heart," she replied. "That's what makes it powerful." Naomi looked over at Ruth, who rocked gently nearby with the twins in her lap. "This family," she said, "we've been through fire, but we're still standing." Matthew nodded. "Because of her." They both looked at Ruth, whose eyes were closed, a soft smile on her face. But even joy carries a cost. One morning, Ruth didn't come over. No phone call, no knock on the door. Naomi drove to her house and found her lying in bed, eyes closed, the Bible open beside her. A peaceful expression on her face. She had passed in her sleep. No pain. No warning, just silence. The funeral was held beneath the same oak tree where Matthew had proposed to Naomi. People came from everywhere, neighbors, shopkeepers. Even the man who had once evicted Ruth showed up with flowers. Naomi gave the eulogy. "My mother never had much," she said. "But she gave everything, not just to me, to everyone. Because she believed kindness isn't something you store, it's something you spend." She paused. "She gave a stranger her last $100. She gave me the strength to believe I deserved more. And in the end, she gave all of us her example." After the burial, Matthew stood alone by Ruth's grave. He knelt, touched the headstone, and whispered, "You gave me your last. I've spent my life trying to give back, but I'll never catch up." A breeze blew through the trees. Somewhere, it felt like Ruth smiled. A few weeks later, Naomi received another letter from the mayor's office. It read, "We would like to name the new community kitchen in East Montgomery after your mother, Ruth Dawson, in honor of her legacy of generosity and service." Tears filled Naomi's eyes. She turned to Matthew. She's still giving. And so, life continued. Not in riches, not in spotlight, but in meaning, in honor, in memory, and in the quiet moments that follow a storm. The sign over the new East Montgomery Community Kitchen was simple. White letters, black background, carved with care. The Ruth Dawson Community Table. Naomi stood beneath it, one hand holding Elijah Jr., the other hand wiping away quiet tears. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, city workers, pastors, teachers, and women who had once stood in line at soup kitchens and shelters. The mayor stepped forward. "She was not a woman of titles or money," he said. "But Ruth Dawson fed people before she fed herself. Today, we ensure her name feeds hearts for generations." Matthew stood beside Naomi, holding Micah in his arms. His suit was modest. His face was proud. When the ribbon was cut, there were no cheers, just soft clapping, and one whispered, "Amen." The kitchen opened a week later. Naomi had insisted on volunteering for the first month. This is how she would have wanted it, she told Matthew. No cameras. Just hands and heart. She wore a simple apron with Ruth's daughter stitched into the pocket. The first person she served was a teenage girl with sunken cheeks and torn jeans. The girl looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Naomi replied softly, "You matter." Matthew, meanwhile, had quietly launched a nonprofit using the last of his savings. He named it the Last 100 Foundation. Its purpose? To find stories like his. Stories where someone gave a little and changed everything. One of the first grants went to a woman in Selma who helped kids cross a dangerous road to get to school every morning. She'd been doing it for 10 years, unpaid, rain or shine. Another went to a single dad who fixed bikes for neighborhood kids in his garage. Small stories, quiet giants, Ruth's kind of people. One afternoon, Matthew and Naomi sat on the floor of their living room while the twins napped. They were surrounded by boxes, old photo albums. Ruth's Bible, a stack of birthday cards she had saved from Naomi over the years. Naomi pulled one out and read aloud. "Dear Mama, I know life is hard now, but I believe we'll smile again someday. When we do, I'll buy you ice cream and take you somewhere green. Love, your daughter." She folded the card slowly. Matthew pulled her close. "She never stopped believing in you." Naomi nodded. "And now I believe in myself." 2 months later, a national publication reached out. They had seen the documentary. They had visited the kitchen. They had interviewed someone from the nonprofit. "Would you be open to a feature?" the editor asked Matthew. He declined at first. "I'm not interested in the spotlight." But then Naomi gently suggested, "What if it helps raise more support? What if someone else out there is waiting to be seen?" So he said yes. The article ran in a spring issue titled "The Last 100, How a Widow's Gift Created a Movement." It went viral. Suddenly, donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. Churches reached out. TV stations called. But not all attention was welcome. A former business partner of Matthew's, someone who had pushed him out years before, filed a claim alleging unauthorized use of shared intellectual property from their real estate days. It was false, but it was loud. The local news picked it up. Comments online turned sour. "He's just playing hero. Bet he pocketed the money. Another fake savior."
Matthew was crushed. "I tried to do it right," he told Naomi one night. "I gave it all away." Naomi held his face in her hands. "And you still have the one thing they can't touch, truth." The court battle was long, draining. Matthew appeared in court wearing the same gray suit he had worn to Ruth's funeral. He sat with a calm expression. When asked why he left the business, he said, "Because values and profits aren't the same." When asked if he had used company plans in his nonprofit, he replied, "All I used was my story, and my story doesn't belong to any boardroom." The judge ruled in Matthew's favor. The claim was dismissed, and the room broke into quiet applause. Outside the courthouse, a reporter caught up with him. "How do you feel?" she asked. Matthew paused, then said, "Grateful, but not for the win. For the reminder." Reminder of what? That doing good will always get tested, and if it doesn't, maybe it wasn't good enough. That weekend, they held a dinner at the community kitchen, not to celebrate the court ruling, but to honor the volunteers. One of the workers, a retired nurse named Helen, stood up to give a toast. "I didn't know Ruth Dawson personally," she said, "but I see her fingerprints on everything here." She raised her glass. "To the woman who gave her last, and the people who turned it into a legacy." Everyone stood. Naomi cried. Matthew closed his eyes. As the seasons changed, so did the home. The boys were now 5. Mischievous, full of questions. Was Grandma Ruth a superhero? Elijah Jr. once asked. Matthew smiled. She was something better, real. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, Naomi found something she hadn't seen in years. A folded note, the same one Ruth had written to the stranger boy years ago. She must have rewritten it later, for safekeeping. It read, "To the boy with tears on his cheeks, don't let today define you. What you lost is not greater than what you still have. Love, a stranger who believes in you." Naomi placed it in a frame. It now hangs on the wall near the front door. Every guest reads it. Most wipe a tear after. Matthew continued his work quietly. No billboards, no flashy videos. But the foundation had helped over 300 people by its 3rd year. And Naomi, in turn, had started a program for women in transition, those leaving shelters or abusive homes, teaching them to manage money, interview for jobs, and believe in their worth again. They named it Ruth's Rising. But life still had one more twist to offer. One spring morning, a letter arrived with a university seal. Naomi opened it and gasped. It was from the Board of Trustees at Oak Ridge College. They were offering her an honorary degree in humanities, citing her impact on community transformation and women's empowerment. She showed the letter to Matthew, speechless. "I didn't even finish college," she said. "You didn't have to," he replied. "You've educated the world in how to love." The ceremony was held in the college auditorium. Naomi stood in front of a crowd of graduates. Her speech was short. "Some of you leave here today with honors. Some of you leave here with debt. I left school once with neither, but I had something else. A mother's belief that I was worth more than the world told me." She held up the diploma. "This isn't mine. It's hers." On the drive home, Elijah Jr. asked, "Can I be like Grandma Ruth?" Naomi looked at him in the rearview mirror. "You already are," she said. That night, Matthew pulled out an old shoebox from the back of the closet. Inside was the original check he had given Ruth years ago, the first sign of his success written in her name. He had framed it but never hung it. Now he placed it above the fireplace. Next to it, he added a new frame. It held a note. In simple cursive, it read, "She gave me her last. I gave her my best. Now it's your turn." Below, in smaller letters, "The last 100. Years later, long after Ruth had been laid to rest, long after the twins grew into men, her story would continue. In every meal served, in every woman lifted, in every voice that said yes to kindness, because Ruth's legacy was never just about charity. It was about courage. It was about seeing someone's future, even when they can't. 10 years had passed since Ruth's funeral. Montgomery had changed. The old corner where Ruth used to sell tomatoes was now a small park named Kindness Square. There was a bench with a brass plaque that read, "She gave when she had nothing, and left behind everything that mattered." Children played there after school. Sometimes Matthew and Naomi brought their twin boys, now teenagers, just to sit on that bench and remember. The last 100 foundation had grown beyond anything Matthew ever imagined. They had chapters in 12 cities. Each year, they gave out the Ruth Dawson Award to someone who performed a selfless act that changed another person's life. The stories never stopped. A janitor who gave up his shoes for a freezing stranger, a nurse who bought groceries for a single mom every week without her knowing, a 5th-grade girl who gave away her birthday money to a homeless man outside a diner. Each time Matthew read a story, he thought of Ruth. Each time he signed a check, he felt her hand on his shoulder. Naomi had become a community mother in her own right. She no longer just volunteered, she mentored. Every Sunday, 5 or 6 young women came to their house for tea and talks on healing, purpose, and faith. Some were quiet, some were angry. Some were just tired, but they all found something in Naomi that the world had taken from them. Peace. They called her Mama Naomi, even the ones older than her. One spring, the governor of Alabama invited Matthew and Naomi to the state capitol. There, under golden lights and tall pillars, they were awarded the state medal for civic honor. Naomi accepted it quietly. Matthew gave a short speech. "We're just 2 people shaped by one act of kindness," he said. "That's all it takes to change everything." After the ceremony, as they stepped outside under the soft orange sky, Naomi paused on the steps. "Can you believe this life?" she asked. Matthew looked around. "I can." "How?" "Because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." "Now I see what she saw." Naomi smiled. "Me too." 1 year later, tragedy struck. Matthew's father, who had lived quietly with them for years, passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had become a quiet presence in their home, gardening, fixing broken toys, sometimes baking biscuits that didn't rise but always tasted like love. At his funeral, Matthew stood over his grave and whispered, "You tried your best." And in the end, that was enough. He placed one of Ruth's tomatoes, preserved and ceramic, on the grave. A full circle. That fall, Elijah Jr. came home from school with a writing assignment. He had to write an essay titled, "A Hero I Know." He didn't pick a celebrity or a sports star. He picked Ruth Dawson. His essay read, "She was not rich. She was not famous. But one time she gave away her last $100 to my dad when he was a crying little boy. And that money helped him become the man who helps others. So I guess I wouldn't even be here if she hadn't done that. And that's what makes her my hero." The teacher called Naomi in tears. She said it was the best thing she'd read in 20 years. The final twist came on a summer afternoon. A car pulled into the driveway of their home, an old dusty van with faded paint and a dented door. An elderly man stepped out, holding a small brown box. He wore a cap and walked with a limp. Naomi answered the door. "Yes? Is this the house of Mr. Matthew Bennett?" Matthew came to the door. The man removed his cap. "You don't know me. But I was a street vendor back when you were a boy. I worked 2 stalls down from Miss Ruth. I saw what she did for you." Matthew blinked. "I remember you. You sold fried plantains." "Yes, name's Reggie. Been trying to find you for years." "When Ruth passed, I found this. She left it in my care. Told me to give it to you one day when I thought you needed reminding." He handed Matthew the small brown box. Inside was a tiny envelope, and inside that envelope, a folded piece of notebook paper. On it, in Ruth's handwriting, were these words: "Dear Matthew, if you're reading this, I'm long gone. But you've made it. I know you have. Don't ever let success make you forget the sidewalk. Don't let comfort erase your hunger. Keep giving. Keep loving. Keep remembering, and when it gets heavy, look up. That's where I'll be. With love, Ruth." Matthew folded the note with shaking hands, and for the first time in years he cried like the boy on the sidewalk. But this time, they were tears of wholeness. The story didn't end there. It never will, because kindness doesn't have an expiration date. It passes from hand to hand, from heart to heart, from $100 to a whole new world. What part of this story touched your heart the most? Please rate this tale from 1 to 10 in the comments. Tap like if it inspired you. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story that heals, uplifts, and reminds you of the power of one act of kindness. Turn on the bell for updates. And thank you for spending this time with us. We'll see you in the next story.